Let's jump right into this explainer, shall we? Today, we're going to trace the absolutely wild evolution of a local street gang that somehow transformed into a billion-dollar, untouchable international terror syndicate. It's quite the story. We're actually going to start right in the middle of a literal shootout. Picture this. It's a cool October afternoon in 1980 Bombay, right outside the Nagpara police station. A young Dawood Ibrahim and his brother have just wrapped up a routine police check-in, what they call a hazari, and they are completely unarmed. But waiting in the building right across the street is a rival Pathan gang member named Amir Zada, and he's got his gun pointed squarely at Dawood's heart. Now, right at that exact moment, in a split-second intervention that literally changed history, a voice screams out, "Dawood, hato!" or "Dawood, move!" That was Khalid Khan, a towering 6'2" Pathan ally. He had this gut feeling Dawood was walking straight into a trap, so he secretly tailed him, packing a concealed weapon. And he yells this warning just as the trigger gets pulled. What happens next is just a crazy, rapid-fire sequence of events that permanently altered the Indian underworld. Amir Zada fires the shot meant for Dawood, but Khalid reacts with, honestly, superhuman speed. He shoves Dawood out of the way and actually takes the bullet in his own arm. Without even missing a beat, Khalid whips out his revolver, returns fire, and hits the attacker. Totally outgunned and bleeding, the assailants have zero choice but to turn and run toward the famous Sarvi Hotel. You know, this single shootout really shows how Dawood was already rewriting the rules of the game. Look, back in the 1970s, Underworld turf wars mostly ended in minor skirmishes and fistfights. But Dawood's tactics? Completely different. He didn't just fight back. He went straight for brutal retaliation. We're talking capturing rivals and amputating their fingers. It was a level of violence that was just totally unheard of in the Indian underworld at the time. Section 1, Birth of the Mumbai Underworld. To figure out exactly how the survivor of that 1980 shootout managed to build an absolute empire, we need to zoom out a bit and look at the actual origins of organized crime in India. Because, as you might guess, organized crime doesn't just pop up overnight. All the way back in 1830, the British East India Company was actively hunting down thuggy robbery gangs. Fast forward a bit to the 1950s, and strict alcohol prohibition laws in Maharashtra suddenly create this massive black market in Bombay. By the 1970s, that black market turns into violent turf wars among smugglers, which directly paves the way for the 1990s, what is widely remembered as India's bloody decade of organized crime. In those early days, these enforcers were just known locally as gundas, which is basically a colloquial term for neighborhood thugs or contracted muscle. But as we're going to see, Dawood Ibrahim's vision went way, way beyond shaking down local businesses. That brings us to Section 2, the 1993 Bombay blasts and delayed justice. This is the crucial turning point where India was basically forced to see these street gangs not just as local criminals, but as massive national security threats. Take a look at this. In 2015, a news report documented the hanging of Yaqub Mehman. He was one of the key figures accused in a truly catastrophic event, the 1993 Bombay blasts. This was a highly coordinated series of terrorist bombings that tragically killed 257 people and left thousands more injured. But here's the kicker. It took 22 years for the Indian judiciary to finally execute this single conviction. Just let that sink in for a second. More than 2 decades. And all the while, the actual mastermind of the attacks, Dawood Ibrahim, along with other top conspirators, remained completely free, just totally off the grid. That staggering delay brings up a pretty heavy question, and it's actually the core focus of a recent academic investigation into India's internal security. The question is this. If the mastermind is known, why does the Mumbai underworld just keep growing? And why on earth are its leaders completely untouchable? Section 3, Deconstructing D Company's Untouchable Empire. To get an objective answer to that question, we're going to dive into a fascinating 2024 master's thesis that systematically unpacks this massive open secret. This research comes from Manvi Krishnamurthy over at Charles University in Prague. The thesis brilliantly maps out exactly how Dawood's syndicate, which is now famously called D Company, morphed from a local smuggling ring into a global terrorism nexus. It really digs into the clandestine links that hold this whole massive structure together. So, one of the biggest lifebloods of this untouchable empire is something called hawala. If you haven't heard of it, it's basically an unlawful money transfer method where no physical cash actually moves across borders. The money flows entirely through trusted, off-the-books networks instead of standard bank wires. Because of that, tracking D Company's billions is honestly a total nightmare for international intelligence agencies. And D Company has aggressively diversified. They are way past street violence now. Their 21st century threat profile is wild. We're looking at global drug trafficking, massive money laundering, narco-terrorism operations, the proliferation of light arms, and high-level contract killings. We aren't just talking about a mafia anymore. They're a literal cross-border destabilization machine. And that evolution right there is exactly why they are so untouchable. Think about it. A traditional street gang relies on controlling local turf and maybe some petty smuggling. But the D Company global nexus, they operate on a completely different planet. They rely on deep political and police protection, global terrorist networking, and even alleged state-sponsored shelter from foreign intelligence like Pakistan's ISI. Which leads us to Section 4, the anatomy of an open secret.
Let's take a closer look at the exact mechanics that make prosecuting these guys so incredibly difficult, even when everybody knows exactly who they are and what they're doing.
The thesis highlights that D Company basically survives on a calculated web of three pillars. First up, you have the criminal groups themselves. They're the ones generating the profit and committing the violence. Second are the protectors. These are the corrupt police, politicians, and attorneys whose whole job is to shield the organization from prosecution. And the third pillar? Specialist support. We're talking influential businessmen and public figures who actually glamorize the syndicate and integrate it into high society. The reality is, you literally cannot dismantle the gang without first dismantling these enablers. Fast forward to today, and Dawood Ibrahim is sitting on top of a multi-billion-dollar empire. It's crazy, but despite being India's absolute most wanted man, that systemic protection we just talked about allows him to oversee an expanding global network with almost total impunity. He reportedly moves freely across Pakistan, the UK, and Dubai without a scratch. So, that leaves us with a massive, critical dilemma to think about. We know their history, we know their tactics, and we know exactly what pillars of political and social protection are shielding them. So, if we know exactly what they've done, and exactly who is protecting them, what will it actually take to dismantle the Mumbai underworld in the 21st century?